What up, everybody? It is JP Finlay. It is Beltway Football. We're brought to you by Oarsman Automotive of Virginia. Like we always are, we ride with those guys. Want you to do the same thing. I'm driving around in a new 4Runner from Oarsman Fairfax Toyota. They took great care of me. Me and the big man have been getting cars from those guys. They do a great job. The big man still in Switzerland. That's right, Switzerland for the big man. So joining me today, I'm pretty excited, is Al Galdi. I don't know if you've ever been on whatever name this podcast has had over the years. Am I right or wrong on that?
Yeah, no, you're right. This is the maiden voyage, so I'm happy
Okay.
to be making my debut. Appreciate it.
Yeah, dude, we're happy to have you. I mean, I have gone on, you and I have talked in on Redskins related issues on a number of different platforms now over the years at a number of different stations. And I mean, part of it's kind of the wild locality of media, but where are you just big picture with where the team is now? Like just the Commanders and new ownership and Dan Quinn and Jaden Daniels, just all of it.
Yeah, really happy. I'm a lifelong fan. I've lived in the Washington D.C. area my whole life. I grew up as a Redskins fan. I was like a cognizant fan for like the back half of the glory days. So like my first season of like actually being aware of sports was '87. So it was that Super Bowl season with Doug Williams, and so like that's what I grew up with. That's what I came to know. And like so many people, we spent the last 30 years kind of waiting on a return to a time period like that. And it's funny, man, as these last 30 years have happened, I've really come to more and more appreciate what I had as a kid, what so many people had as kids. And it's like, you don't know when you're in the glory days, you don't know that you're in the glory days. And if I could go back and tell my 1987 self, it would be, hey, enjoy this because you're going to go a while without something like this. But in terms of where they're at now, I love it. I mean, I think we all know that like nothing's for sure, but to have this marriage of new ownership, new football operations department, new coaching staff, new quarterback, a bunch of new players, I think there's a lot to like. I'm a big Josh Harris fan. I think actually looking back on that ownership process, it's very fortuitous that Harris was the guy because if I could undo it, I wouldn't undo it. I wouldn't like say go to Jeff Bezos. I think there are many good things with Josh Harris that we maybe didn't recognize in the moment, but I know I've come to recognize now. Big analytics guy, understands sports, has done some very good things with the Sixers and Devils. So, again, like nothing's for sure, and you can't just like plant the flag of victory, but there's a lot to like with where this team is at.
Yeah, I agree with you. When you really zoom out big picture, there's that quote from The Office, like, I wish we knew when the good old days were happening, or I wish we could tell when the good old days were there before they left. And I mean, that's totally what it was. And I do think on some level, the Harris group has like a little bit of like, I don't know that it's irreparable, but there's significant damage to this fan base. Like, I'm curious if you have friends, like, I have buddies that I grew up with that just Sundays are no longer dictated by what the Burgundy and Gold are doing. And it's not about getting them back to FedEx Field. It's about getting them back on their couch at 1 o'clock. Like, and a lot of that just might be like the functionality of our world, but between you can watch updates on your phone, and kids sports are rampant and out of control. But like, I think like when Mitch Rails talked about wanting to build the team Hall of Fame and bring kids from around the area there and give them a free hat, I think that's so smart because I think they really have to rebuild with kids in our area. And there may be like a generation gap where there's a chunk of people that aren't as invested as you and I were growing up.
Absolutely. I mean, the glory days that you and I experienced were a long time ago now. You're talking about the mid to late 80s and early 90s. That's 30 plus years ago. And so, unless you're in like your mid to late 30s or older, you don't have memories of those days. Like those days don't mean anything to you. You grew up with Dan Snyder as the owner, and you grew up with the team maybe making the playoffs once every 4 or 5 years, and it ended up being a one-off. And the team, the next season would go right back to being not very good. So yeah, I mean, I think we all recognize that the team becoming good is what is going to rebuild this fan base better than anything, right? So if the Commanders become a perennial playoff team, perennially getting, 10, 11, 12 regular season wins, Jaden Daniels kills it, people will come. I very much do believe that.
I think
But
if
it is,
Jaden kills it, it happens immediately, even without the wins.
yeah, Yeah, well, and we saw that with Robert in 2012 because the team was 3-6, but people still were very much into it because Robert was doing so well and was so exciting to watch. So there's no doubt. I know there is the name thing, and that is a big deal for a lot of people, and I get it. I know a lot of people who hate that the name changed, but I do think if the team does well, there are people who will come around to Commanders. I know a lot of people despise it. I get that. I don't blame anyone who despises that name, but I think it starts with success. And if this team actually became good again, I think a lot of people would have a hard time not being truly into it. The NFL is like crack, man. We are addicted to it as a country. And you're telling me that if a team in a top 10 market like Washington, D.C. is doing really well, you're not going to take to that. You're not going to get into that. I just have a hard time believing that people would be able to not get into something like that. It would be so exciting.
I totally agree. I think what's funny is I actually have notes for our conversation. We haven't hit on any of them yet, but I also think like I think the never like the group of people that says, "Oh, well, I'll never root for them because they changed the name." They're lying. If they win 11 games, they're back in. I think the actual percentage of people that the name is the defying factor is so small. And dude, I think especially on social media, so much of the noise you hear, and I hate this for dudes like you and I, or just people that grew up that name meant a lot and that logo meant a lot. And I understand why it changed. Like I live in the modern world. I don't think they can go back, but I think the name discussion has been not totally, but mostly co-opted by people that are coming from a political sphere that just want to pick a fight of like a culture war type thing. And I kind of just go the other way from all of it at this point.
Well, and I think it has been an issue that has worn everyone down. I mean, this Saturday will mark 4 years since the retirement of the Redskins name and Redskins brand. And here we are 4 years later, and this is still an issue. Like this is still a really big
Well,
deal.
I think it's still a really big deal because the new name kind of stinks. The rollout kind of stinks. There's no
Yeah.
nickname. Like the W logo kind of stinks. I I think they're going to change it still. But I hope when they do, if they do, that they just do what the Guardians did. Just post a tweet one day and be like, "Yo, we changed the name." None of the focus groups and back and forth and blah blah blah.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I do wonder is if you're the Josh Harris group and you know that another rebrand would come with an exorbitant cost and would be this lengthy, grueling, draining process, if you're wondering if maybe is there viability with Commanders, as much as people say they don't like it, like we just talked about it, if the team gets good again, could it be that maybe you don't have to engage in yet another name change? Could it be that people would take to this name if the team became good? I don't know the answer to that. Again, there are people who despise Commanders with like every fiber of their being. And again, I get it. I understand it. But I wonder if the Harris Group, and maybe one of the reasons why the Harris Group publicly has not put forth any kind of a real stance on the name is that it kind of wants to see if maybe if we just stick with this for a little while longer and the team gets good, maybe just maybe people might take to it. We'll see.
Yeah, I think getting good is the key. We'll transition here because one of the things you had a tweet yesterday. Today is we're Tuesday, July 9th, 7:41 a.m. You had I think this is last night, yesterday. You can follow Al at Al Galdi, Galdi. If you're listening to this, you probably already follow Al, but you should. Um, the more that Brandon Aiyuk acts like a drama queen, the more I appreciate Terry McLaurin. Obviously, I liked that tweet. And I remember even when Terry was going through his contract stuff, and we're not trying to rewrite history here. I mean, Terry skipped OTAs and I believe didn't even come from minicamp. Like he was in a contract negotiation. He followed parts of the contract negotiation playbook as he should. Like these guys don't get guaranteed deals. They how they are able to assert their will is missing some of these things. But Terry never did the social media nonsense. Terry never even did the like step one of social media nonsense where you erase everything from your Instagram page that has a team logo with it. Maybe because the team logo changed so much, you just have the right one anyway. But like, I agree with you. Terry handled a contract negotiation like a pro. I think what Ayuk has done until this practice picture was within the general scope of how people handle contract negotiations. I think posting that practice film picture, posting the Commanders practice film picture is a step too far. I think Jaden needs to reevaluate his role in all this. And frankly, I kind of think the Washington door to Brandon Aiyuk is fairly closed. I was curious your thoughts.
It does feel that way. I mean, we had what Adam Schefter said on NFL Live a few weeks back that the Commanders and Niners talked, but that the Commanders decided not to do the deal. That is telling. The fact that Adam Peters was a key figure in the Niners front office when they drafted Aiyuk and thus knows Aiyuk, and yet the Commanders still have not moved on trading for Aiyuk. I feel like that is telling. And yeah, I do feel like this latest post on TikTok of the practice footage was sort of a crossing of the line. Not because the footage was like ultra revealing, it wasn't, but it was another instance of Brandon Aiyuk engaging in this like attention seeking, look at me, needy behavior. And to me, that's off putting. Like, that's not what you want from one of your top players, a guy acting like that. He's been doing things that like each thing individually is not so bad. And I don't think that Aiyuk is like some horrible person or anything like that. But him openly flirting with the Commanders like this while under contract to the Niners, him basically openly begging the Commanders to trade for him, now putting out this practice footage, I don't think that that's necessary. And to go back to the Terry McLaurin point, so you're right. In the 2022 offseason, Terry no-showed a good portion of the Commanders' offseason program. But Terry never did anything like this on social media, never flirted with another NFL team, never tried to put out these like cryptic messages of, oh, look at me. This is what I could do. This is where I could be, but I'm not there yet, but I could be there yet. He didn't do any of that. Like, he acted in, yes, a firm way, but I thought that Terry acted in a respectful way. And Terry got his money. And one of the things that I've not liked, I've heard and read people say things like, well, this is what you have to do to get paid. No, it's not. You don't have to act like this. Terry didn't act like this and he got paid. John Allen didn't act like this and he got paid. Plenty of other guys have not acted like this
Ron.
and gotten paid. So, yeah, right, exactly, Duran. So, look, Aiyuk is a very good receiver. He is worthy of big money. I think he will get big money. I think the Niners are going to give him an extension. We saw this with Deebo Samuel a few years ago. But from a Commander's perspective, I'm getting turned off by Brandon Aiyuk. And especially now with the nature of the NFL draft, each one now is so receiver rich because of the way the college football offense is being done. I don't even know that you necessarily have to trade for a Brandon Aiyuk to be great at receiver.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I reported then and have said this since, like, the time for this thing to get done was at the draft. Now, the Niners are focused on winning a Super Bowl and I don't think it would be, but let's just say hypothetically, it's a 26 first rounder. A 26 first rounder doesn't help them win a Super Bowl this year. They've been at the doorstep twice. Like, they're focused on winning. At the draft would be one thing because then they can use that pick for a player to win a Super Bowl this year, right? Who knows what that roster looks like next year because they're going to have to pay Purdy. And that is, I mean, what are we talking about for a quarterback money by next year? 60? And then they got their own decisions on, do you pay Purdy 60? Whatever, right? Like that's for them to figure out. I think and have maintained throughout that this is all about money, and San Francisco has a great track record of paying their own guys. But even you compare it to Deebo, because Deebo got paid the same time Terry did, I believe. And Deebo did more of the scrub everything from Instagram routine, but it was never like this. And you and I have been in contract negotiations. I'm not comparing this, right? Like, I never made 30 mil or something, but when you're in a contract negotiation, it requires a tremendous amount of patience and like a willingness to just shut up. Like, you just got to shut up and let it ride out and let it play out. And Aiyuk appears to have neither of those at all. And I think this last, I think if you got some truth serum in some people in Santa Clara and in Ashburn, all sides are like, somebody please shut this guy up, take his phone away.
Yeah, 100%. There is an element of you got to act almost stoic. You got to act like
Right.
you're not bothered. You have to no sell stuff. You have to kind of just stand there and just act like you don't care, even though you very much do care. And everyone will understand that you care. But, when he goes on the Pivot podcast and Jaden Daniels is right there and Aiyuk is saying, well, I could be catching passes from this guy. Like, what are you, what are you doing? Why are you saying that? And, again, from a Commander's perspective, because that's how I'm viewing all of this, stop bringing our quarterback into this. See, I don't like that. I don't like that Brandon Aiyuk stuff now becomes Jaden Daniels stuff. And, Aiyuk is bringing him up while doing the Pivot podcast. Aiyuk is posting a Commander's practice footage that whether he got it from Jaden or not raises immediate questions of whether Aiyuk got the footage from Jaden. So I don't like that about this. This is not Jaden Daniels' mess. So, to me, keep our quarterback out of this.
Yeah, dude, totally. And I think posting that picture is so obvious where it's coming from, how you obtained it. You know what I mean? And then it just seems so unfair to his boy. Like, and if you're Daniels, I think it's time for a real conversation. Like, listen, man, you're my friend from college. I'm supported you so much in this contract talk. Please leave me the hell out of the rest of this. Beyond this Aiyuk thing, which is, good in a way that it's content for mid-July, but it's just so stupid that you hope it goes away. What do you think of Jaden? How do you think he's handled everything so far and what you've seen, what you've heard?
Yeah, so look, I'm not going to be a phony. I wanted them to take Drake May, but
Really?
I did, yeah. I
Why?
loved I looked at Daniels. I had concerns about the frame and about, he ran in a reckless way at LSU. And so I did worry about him being an injury risk. I do think that there is merit to the concern with the pressure to sack rate issue. I know that there's context for it, but his is abnormally high. Like, I think it's hard to just ignore that. So, like those things weighed. It's not like I despise Daniels, but I just said,
Sure.
you're trying to make this ultra important decision. Like, who do you like the best? That's all. And so I did want May. Now, clearly, the team didn't see it that way because all the reporting has been the decision came down to Daniels and J.J. McCarthy. And I'll say this. I love everything that we have seen and heard from it about Jaden Daniels since the draft pick was made. The overwhelming praise of this guy really has stood out. And I do think it's sincere. I don't think this is phony because I don't think you'd be going out of your way to say these things if you didn't really feel this way about the guy. So, you hear about the work ethic, which is great, showing up at 5:45 in the morning, which is great. I think one of the more telling things was Cliff Kingsbury in a press conference a few months back talking about how Jaden was ahead of the schedule in terms of calling out protections. And we know last season how much of an issue that became when it came to Sam Howell and Nick Gates. And so just to hear something like that, again, Kingsbury doesn't have to say that if it's not true. He put that out there unsolicited. So stuff like that really jumps out. And, we do know that one of the reasons that Daniels was very well regarded, he has these great throwing fundamentals. And I think that we've seen some of that. Not that we're all quarterback experts, but that certainly seems to be something that has been on display in these offseason practices. And I don't think it's unreasonable to think that he could be on the verge of having one of these really good rookie seasons. Now, again, got to see a lot more. We've only had offseason practices and shorts, but I do feel better about the pick, and I am excited about Jaden. And I tell you, for whatever it's worth, every time this guy does a media avail, whether it's a presser or an interview, he comes off so well. He strikes
Yeah.
that perfect balance of confident, but also humble. There is a self-awareness with him. Anytime someone tries to talk about, you can be the savior for the franchise, he's like, no, I just want to have a good practice the next day. That kind of stuff is really good. I think it plays so well. It subcommunicates so many good things about him. I think it makes him well liked by his teammates. So, I get it. It's May and June and July and everything is, fine and dandy now. But I'd say so far, I don't know how you don't feel better about this pick today as compared to on April 25th, however you felt on April 25th.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the communicative stuff that he's done throughout this process, he's had opportunities to kind of go for the spotlight or create, even if it's not controversy, create more buzz or drama. And he's gone the other direction every time. The only thing that kind of continues to pop up with him is Aiyuk, but it's Aiyuk driving that and not Jaden. And watching him, I really like the release. I really like the mechanics. He's going to make some rookie plays. Watching OTAs one day, there was I don't know exactly what it was, but it looked like kind of like a bubble action to the left side. Defense clearly, read it, prepared. Like they were in position. He still threw it. Would have been a pick six or even a fumble six because it was like a backward. Like there's going to be stuff, and I think we've got to like wrap our minds around that. But I think he's the most exciting quarterback prospect, certainly since Robert. And I think his game is different. The frame does concern me a little. I mean, his trunk is okay, but like his shoulders are slight. Like you know what I mean? Like there's not a lot there. There was a play, I've talked about this during OTAs, where it looked like it was like a design run around the left side. And they had like a 6-8 yard gain. So maybe you're calling that on a 3rd and 4, it's first down, everybody move forward. And instead he like cut it up and like rather than just taking the sideline, taking your gain. And a couple of veteran players were in front of me. They're like, don't do that. Don't do that. Now, again, it was June and there's no pads. Nobody's hitting. So maybe he's just kind of testing things out and testing his speed or whatever. But there's going to be some rookie stuff. The pressure to sack stuff's interesting. I think compared to guys that have been really good right away, I'm with you. But I thought that got overblown with Drake May because talking to people from Baton Rouge, it's my understanding that Jaden Daniels really like transformed his offseason and his preparation going into this past year. That's when you started hearing about the VR and needing his own key to get into the team facility and stuff. And I think the gap between him and Drake's pressure to sack this past year was a point, maybe. Like it was so minuscule that wasn't it like 20.2 to 19.1 or something?
It was minimal, and that is true. Drake May's pressure to sack rate numbers were not great. They were better than Jaden's, but they were not great. That's for sure. And Jaden's did get better. And if you look at a variety of current NFL quarterbacks when it comes to pressure to sack rate, there are guys who have improved on that in the NFL. Justin Herbert has gotten better at that. Jalen Hurts has gotten better at that. So it's not unreasonable to think that Jaden Daniels might not get better at that. And, you mentioned the VR stuff. I actually had on my podcast Jack Marucci, the director of performance innovation at LSU, and he detailed what went on with that. And it is remarkable. The work ethic of Jaden Daniels, I know it's been talked about a lot, but that is significant. This guy puts in the time. This guy is like all about football, that he went as far as he did to get better like he did, to go through something like that with the VR stuff and showing up super early. Very encouraging. And I love that the Commanders are bringing that technology to their team facility. And I think that could be a real edge for them because that's something that did wonders for him at LSU.
Dude, I totally agree with all that. I think the work ethic and just kind of in basketball, the term gym rat, like, oh, it's just a gym rat. He's always at the gym. Like, we need a football term for that because the football term is kind of football nerd, which is kind of a negative connotation. But I guess gym rat ain't exactly a positive connotation. So whatever, we'll go with football nerd. But I think he really is. Like, he only wants to be in the playbook and working out and working with the guys. And I don't know. I think it's a really exciting time to kind of circle everything back to the beginning of our conversation, talking about the VR, and we see the analytics ads and all these, the health and wellness ads. Like you also have ownership that is pushing all in on trying to develop a championship organization. I think they're a few years away from really mattering, but like they have the full support. And what I cared about most, and that's one of the reasons I didn't get as upset about Ben Johnson, ultimately basically telling them no, right? That's what really happened. We can, discern from all the different sound clips, whatever you want to say. Like Ben Johnson said, nah, I'm good, man. But I didn't really care because I feel like for the first time, maybe since Jack Kent Cook to Mark Rippon, you had like owner, GM, head coach, quarterback, all aligned. And that organizational alignment, when everybody's pushing the same direction, has so much freaking value. And we haven't seen it in so long.
Yeah, and with Dan Quinn, something that I've really come to appreciate is that he very clearly put in a lot of time to learn from where he went wrong as Falcons head coach. There is a real humility with Dan. First of all, you can tell he so appreciates this second opportunity to be an NFL head coach, but he really did do a deep dive on, okay, where did I go wrong? How and why did I go wrong? How can I be better the next time? And something that I've wondered about is, when Washington hired Ron Rivera, right? He got fired in early December 2019, got hired in January 2020. There was only 1 month between head coaching jobs. He never had a lot of time to really reflect on and learn from what went wrong for him as Panthers head coach. Dan Quinn had years to do this. He got fired by the Falcons in October of 2020, doesn't get hired by the Commanders until this past February. He had a long time to look back on what he did right, what he did wrong, how he could be better the next time. And I do think there's value in that. As you know, NFL history is filled with guys who became great head coaches in their second go rounds as
Sure.
NFL head coaches. And I'm not saying that's going to happen with Quinn, but I wouldn't dismiss that as a possibility. And I always have great respect for someone who has the ability to engage in that introspection and say, okay, where did I go wrong? How can I be better? And Quinn pretty clearly seems to have done that.
I'm with you. I like that a lot. One thing I like with Quinn a lot is Ron, and I'm not sure I blame him for it because he was like also the face of the organization as the organization was undergoing tremendous changes, and he tried to like make these grand statements and act like this elder statesman, right? Quinn doesn't want to do any of that. Like asked about perfect attendance during the voluntary portion, he's like, "Yeah, we'll see if that matters when we get to training camp. Maybe we'll be a little bit ahead, but it'll be 1 or 2%." Like every time he has an opportunity for like a perception, we're going to set the tone kind of thing, he just keeps it simple, and I applaud that. And that's a difference from Ron. Did he take a year off, or was he immediately at DC the following year? Do you know?
So Quinn was the Cowboys defensive coordinator the last 3 seasons. So that would be 21, 22, 23. Like I said, he got fired
Fired in
October
20.
20. So yeah, so it was only a few months off. Yeah.
But he does seem, and he talks about this, that he owns the fact that it's a second chance. And a lot of these folks, like Zach Ertz, hit on this, and independent of one another. Ertz, Cliff, Joe Witt certainly has a chip on his shoulder. Feels like he's been passed over for a long time. Quinn, kind of Kingsbury. Like it feels like a lot of these guys are in a position where, all right, we know what we know. We know what we did wrong, and we know how we're going to make it work this time. The other thing, going back to Quinn, and we're going back 6 months or whatever, 5 months. I never. Do you want an offensive coach with a young quarterback? Sure, but when you have good teams and good quarterback, like there's going to be some churn. That's Jaden Daniel. I'm sorry for all the concern about losing a coordinator. I believe Jalen Hurts will have his sixth straight year with a different coordinator. When you're good, you're just good. Think about, I mean, Patrick Mahomes sure seemed to be able to withstand the loss of Eric Bieniemy and like whoever was there before. You know what I mean? Like, I think we make far too much of that. When you're a really good player, it takes care of itself.
Very much so. And there are different natures of defensive minded head coaches, right? So, are you a defensive minded head coach who is ultra conservative and is stuck in doing offense like it's 1993? Or are you a forward thinking defensive minded coach who leans on his offensive coordinator who's very good at what he does? And so you end up having a very good offense. And Quinn strikes me as the latter. I mean, the Falcons, when Dan Quinn was the head coach and Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator, had great offenses. I think Dan Quinn understands the importance and value of offense, and he does not strike me as someone who's going to be, hey, we got to run the ball on every first and second down. Like I don't. He does not strike me like that in
No,
any way. And,
like
and, that,
like
and that is
Zimmer.
the yeah, right. And that's the concern with the defensive-minded head coach that you are like multiple steps behind the truly innovative offensive teams in the NFL. I don't know how good they'll be offensively this season, but I'm not worried about like philosophically them not being where they should be. There's a lot to like, I think, with Cliff Kingsbury. And I think if they let him do what he wants to do, I think this could be, at the very least, an offense that we look at and we say, okay, the process is sound, the philosophy is sound. It's just a matter of going out and executing well.
And going one step further with that, I think because they have this organizational structure in place, I think even if Quinn somehow reverted into wanting, hey, run the ball on first, second down, and then we'll see about third down. Like even if he retreated into a Mike Zimmer clone, which I don't think he will, but even if he did, I think Peters gets the ball. Like I think they have a hierarchy that will not allow for some of the stuff we've seen where coordinators have their own agendas and whatever else. So, Galdi, because Mitch isn't here and he's in Switzerland, I don't have the good Zoom login. He has the good Zoom login. And I was just made aware that I only have 8 minutes left in the Zoom. So I did want to talk about, I don't know if you'll like this reference or not, but I often, especially if I come back from being out of town or something, um, I will make a point to listen to your podcast that morning. And I consider you like the tip of the content spear because you're putting that thing out so early and it's your baby at this point. Like you get to do what you want. How much have you enjoyed, and I'm not that probably the immediate transition was enjoyable, but like where you are now from hosting the radio and just having your podcast every morning. I mean, that thing's up by like 6 or something. It is a tool for people like me that sometimes need to catch up, you know?
I appreciate that, man. Yeah. So I very much enjoy doing what I'm doing now. I had a great time in radio, but there's a lot about radio I don't miss. I miss the people, but the way that radio was going, I wasn't around people very much anymore because a lot of those people weren't there anymore. And what happened to 980 just to me was very sad, and it got mismanaged horribly. And it's a shell of what it was. And I don't take any joy in saying that. It's just, the truth. So to be doing my own thing is great. You can dictate how you do it, when you do it. You have your vision and you can execute it exactly as you want. One of the things that became very frustrating to me in radio was that like every 12 to 18 months, I got moved to another show, moved to another time slot. It was like out of your control. It wasn't in any way like dependent on how you were doing. It was just like, well, this person left, or we had to fire that person, so you need to do this, or we got sold, so you need to do that. And it was like out of your hands. And that lack of continuity is really bad when it comes to developing an audience. So to have this, like you said, it can put it out early each weekday morning, Monday through Friday, out by 5 a.m. Talk Commanders on every show.
What time
Get
do you
great.
wake up, dude?
Well, I tape a lot of it the day before, but
Sure. I mean, we've done that.
yeah, but I'll be up late into the night, like 1, 2 in the morning, and then put it out by like 3. Sometimes I'll wake up at like 12 or 1, and then go through the stuff that I got to add on to it, and then get it out by 5. But I've had a lot of fun doing it. A lot of great guests like yourself. I've always been very appreciative of you coming on. And yeah, I think the other thing too with podcasting, and this because this podcast was one of the first real big ones when it comes to talking about this football team. It's on demand, right? Like, I don't know about you, but that's how I watch TV now, right? I very rarely watch things live. Probably Commanders games are like one of the few things I watch live, but you watch on demand. You listen when you want, you listen how you want. If there's something on the show that you're not that interested in, you don't listen to that, but you go with something else. So I just feel like there is a convenience with podcasting that is why it is, not just the future, but I feel like it's the present too. So I've enjoyed it greatly, and I'm very appreciative of the success that we've had.
Yeah, dude, I'm glad. I enjoy it. It's the difference between podcasts and it's funny because I like kind of went backwards into the radio route, right? Like I wouldn't have the radio show without the success of this podcast that started. And they're just so different in that the radio can be a very passive audience. You get in your car and the radio's on, right? And so you're just kind of listening. Whereas if you to listen to a podcast, you have to be actively engaging with that podcast, right? You have to pull your phone out, download it or stream it, but like you have to actively seek it out. The and I the politics and the business side of radio is what it is, right? But the immediate interaction when there is a big event, a big moment is pretty damn cool. But the community you build on both is probably what's most important, and I've enjoyed that. I do think, and I'm not like I kind of work with those guys, which is also interesting. But like I am glad to see 980 kind of coming back with Sheehan and Russell and Doc's always on. You know what I mean? Like it seems like I mean I remember listening to 980 as a kid and just like thinking it was this like gravitational pull. You know what I mean? And then slowly kind of 106 came on. It's interesting, like as we try to figure out our new world at Monumental Sports, where it had been at previous places. It's a interesting time in the DC sports ecosystem because it, there was a Canadian prime minister made this joke about like, yeah, being next to the United States is like sleeping next to an elephant. You just hope it doesn't roll over the wrong way. Um, that is the power of the burgundy and gold in this city. And if they can get good, I think sky's the limit for everything. Because I think the Nats are getting really good really fast. The Caps are trying to handle this rebuild on the fly. The Wiz are years away, but I'm glad they're finally tearing it down. Like I think it's an optimistic time for sports in DC.
I think it is. And, it's a funny deal with the football team. For all of the problems the last 30 years, the football team is still by far the number one sports enterprise in the Washington, D.C. area in terms of interest. And, that's even with everything that has gone down. It is still by far number one. It just is. That's just the truth. And that's not a knock on the other teams. I talk about all those other teams on my podcast, but the Commanders still are that driving force. And so if they got good again, I think watch out because I think it's interesting. During this time of the team being down, what have you also had? This incredible rise of the NFL. So the football team has been able to sort of ride that rising tide that's lifting all the boats. Even with all of the ineptitude of the football team, it has still benefited from this tremendous growth of the NFL as a whole. And so I think you're so right. Like if this team got good again, it would be an eruption of not just joy, but also interest. And I also think, too, when we talk about like if people are still fans of the team like they were back in the day, I think there's still interest in a team. You might not be as active of a fan as
Yeah,
you were. You might not be spending your disposable income on the team like you otherwise would be, but there's still a lot of interest in the team. People wanting to listen to discussion about the team, read things about the team. I think that is still at a very high level. And of course, it would go even higher if the team got good again.
I agree with that. Last thing, yes or no? Binary answer. World Series baseball at Camden Yards this fall.
Yes.
Let's go. Let's go. All right, Galdi. Thank you, dude. I really appreciate you making time for us. And I don't know when you sleep, but get some of it.
I appreciate you having me, man. Thank you very much.
All right, that's Al Galdi. I hope you enjoyed it. I legitimately don't know when Mitch is getting back, if he's coming back, but I assume he and I will have a pod later this week. If not, I'll make somebody else talk to me for a half hour at 7:30 in the morning. Thanks to Al Galdi. If you made it this far, I owe you a beer. That was great, man.
I appreciate it very